city and my home. He's going to give a presentation on how to protest your taxes, also whatever other services.
Thank you very much. Good morning, San Antonio. Thank you very much for having us here at District 10. I very much appreciate it. My name, like she was saying, my name is Rich Acosta. I'm the president of My City Is My Home, a 501c3 nonprofit that supports the community. What we do is we get professionals like real estate agents to come out and use their services, their professional services to support the community. So how do we do that? For homeowners, we do free property tax workshops where we help you all learn how to protest property taxes on your own. And then we also provide the service of representation. We do for low-income homeowners, if their home value is less than $200,000 and that's their homestead, we could protest their property taxes for free. We do that with our partner at Protest Tax. And last year, we were able to reduce values over $115 million. Property tax saved for the clients over $3 million. So some people are like, how much can you actually lower your property? One residential property down $659,000 on one property, right? So we represent so we don't just help low income, of course, because then I couldn't bring down $659,000, right? We help residential and commercial properties, and I'll get into all that. But today, it's all about how you all can protest your property taxes. To give you a little bit more confidence about what we're providing here is we're able to do protesting of people's taxes in 55 counties, not all 55, but 55 counties in Texas. Had about 3,000 clients last year. And now let's get into homestead exemptions. So that's the first part of really protesting your property taxes, ensuring that you have all your exemptions on your property. So your homestead exemption, that is for homeowners that own their home and live in the home. That's it. That is the requirement for a homestead exemption. So if you own your home and you live in that home, you can get a homestead exemption. And what that provides you is a tax appraisal cap at 10%. So that means that your taxable value every year can now increase more than 10%. So if year one, your property was valued at $100,000, and in year two, your property was valued at $115,000, they would subtract that extra 10%, that $5,000 off of your taxable value, and you would be paying taxes off of $110,000. So that's how that 10% helps, and then it rolls to next year and the next year. Now, something for you to know is that some people's property value stayed the same this year. They actually didn't get an increase, right? And if that happened to you, you didn't get a total market on your appraisal notice. If you look at the total market value, if that value stayed the same and didn't increase this year, and you decide not to protest, well, one thing that's happened, that 10% cap wasn't used. So it didn't increase the value of your property over 10%, and you didn't protest that value that stayed the same. That means next year, that 10% can roll over and your taxable value can increase by 20%. You can get an over 65 exemption once on the year you turn 65. So you don't have to wait until your birth date. You can wait until your birth year. Exactly. You wait for your birthday year when that comes into play at 65 years old. Then you can go ahead and apply for the senior freeze, and that freezes the majority of your taxable value except the Universal Health System and the San Antonio River Authority. Those portions do not freeze. They will accumulate a little by little, but they're the smaller portion of the taxing values. So I wouldn't worry too much about that much unless you're on Social Security. If you're just surviving off of Social Security, every $50 or so increase on your tax bill counts. So that's another reason why, as a senior, you should still consider protesting your property taxes to keep that taxable value low. Also for seniors, that exemption doesn't stay with your property if you decide to rent the property or you plan on passing that property to your heirs. Well, anytime, once you're no longer that's not your primary address anymore, that exemption goes away, and whoever takes over the property will be paying that full amount, that taxable value without exemptions on it, which is going to be the higher amount. So that's another reason to keep protesting your valuations, to keep those your taxable value low. Disabled veterans, if you're less than 100% VA rated, you can still get an extra exemption on your property taxes. And then if you're 100% disabled veteran, you don't pay property taxes. But again, I tell my 100% disabled veterans, you protest for your heirs, you plan on passing it to your heirs, and then also it affects the equity of the neighborhood. So if your home has a bunch of issues with it and the county doesn't have enough sales in the area, they'll use the equity of all the properties to base the valuations of everybody's properties. Because every year when you get that notice in the mail and you don't protest that value, you're telling the county, oh yeah, that's how much my property's worth and I don't have any problems with it, right? And so that's a reason why you should protest. And then SSDI, if you're on Social Security disability, you can also get an additional exemption on your property. So now let's get into how to protest property taxes. First thing you're going to do is look at your notice appraisal value. So you get that in the mail around April every year. It's like clockwork. That's when they get it. They send it out. And you're going to look at the total market value of the property. So you're going to look at the different things as homestead cap, exemptions, appraisal value. Don't worry about any of those other values on that. For the purposes of protesting your taxes, you're looking at the market value. And so in this example, they have the market value at $362,000, but then they have like the appraised value at $329,000. That's because the homestead exemption is keeping their property taxable value down. But if they feel that their home is not worth $362,000, then they should protest their property taxes. And that's what you're trying to decide. Right now, looking at that value, can I put a sign in front of my door, say it's for sale, and sell it for that amount? If that answer is no, then you should protest that value. So on your notice to protest, what you'll notice is there's going to be 2 red marks at the top of the page, and that you basically just flip your notice to value over, and it'll show you your notice to protest. At the top of that page, it's going to ask you, is the informal conference requested? The answer is yes. See, in the past, if you've protested your property taxes, it was basically automatic. You go to the informal and then you go to the formal hearing. Well, this year you actually have to select yes or no. Do you want to go to the informal hearing? And I don't know a reason why you would not want to go to the formal hearing. Not go to the informal before you go to the formal hearing, because that gives you the opportunity to talk to an appraiser, and basically we'll get into that. So yes for the informal conference, and then the evidence requested. You want to check that box because that is the properties that the county used to get your value. So they're actually going to tell you, hey, these are the properties I used to come up with your valuation. And so now you get a chance to look at that. And I'll get more into the evidence packet in this presentation. The rest of the sections are pretty plain. Section 1 is just your information. You check the boxes like over 65, disabled person, depending on what your exemptions are. Then you fill out your name, your phone number, your email address if you have one. Then you get into the section of what's your reason to protest. It's just basically that top part where it says incorrect appraisal value or unequal compared to other properties. That little box right there, that's the one you want to choose if you're going to protest your property. All those other check marks like incorrect property descriptions, incorrect property owner's name, those are things that you can talk about during your protest, but the majority of you are here to protest your property taxes, and so that's the one that you want to check on. Then at the next section of there, it's going to ask you, do you want to do a regular panel protest or formal panel? This is new. They haven't asked you that in the past. A formal panel, a regular panel, is the normal formal panel that you've done in the past. A single member panel is if you've done the protest in the past and you went to formal, you'd be meeting with the appraiser and 1 member of the ARB instead of 3 members of the ARB, which is in the regular panel. So I don't see any reason why you would want a single member panel. So I would suggest a regular panel in this part. And then it's going to ask you, how do you want to do your formal protest? The informal is going to be on Zoom or by telephone. The formal, you can choose by in person, by Zoom, or by telephone. And I suggest in person or by telephone. I don't suggest doing it by Zoom because if your internet's sketchy, then it might drop the call or anything. Whereas if you're on the phone and it drops the call, you can just call back and they'll reconnect you. I don't ever suggest to put in whatever value you're going for because maybe you don't know what that value is because you're waiting for the evidence packet. And then you sign, you date it, and then we suggest you either email it or turn it in person, because if they let you turn it in person, they stamp that letter and show you proof that you've turned it in. Or if you email it, it sends you an automatic reply that they got it, but at least you know that they received it, right? That they received that email. And so if you send it by mail, you have to deal with snail mail, but at least you can get it stamped before May 15th by the post office to turn it in. But email is the quickest if you're able to do so. All right, so now that you've turned in your notice to protest, what's the next step? Is to take 10 photos of your property. We want you to take photos of the repairs that are needed of the property. So you want to take pictures of any roof damage, if you have water leaks, your foundation damage, show all the repairs that are needed, because that is a condition of your property. Because there's excellent condition, they have different condition codes that I'll get into, but they have excellent, they have good, they have average, fair, and poor. And so they base that on the condition of your property where you're going to be at. And so that has a drastic effect on the value of your home. So making sure that they know what the condition of your property is great, because unlike your exemptions, once you move or you pass away, you pass it to your heirs, well, that exemption goes away, but the condition of your home is the same until you make those repairs. So the condition will continue on with the property. Now, the photos, we don't suggest to focus on photos of, oh, my kitchen only has laminate, or my carpet, well, I have carpet and not tile. Those are not good unless there's repairs that are needed, because they don't really care about the upgrades. They care about condition. If the laminate countertop is in good condition, well, then it's fine, right? They don't really adjust for granite countertop or tile versus carpet. They're mostly focusing on condition. Then with all your repairs that you have, then get a contractor's estimate. Get a licensed contractor to do a free estimate for you. That way you can show how much those property that repairs are valued at when you go and you protest. And it gives the appraiser that, hey, a second person's looked at these pictures and verified that these repairs that are needed, and then put a value towards it. But again, don't focus on upgrades. Don't get quotes on new granite countertops or new tile floors, because again, they would want you to know what's the cost to repair the carpet, what's the cost to repair the roof. You know, they're not looking for your whole new roof unless that is inside an inspection or a repair report that, oh, the entire roof has to be replaced because of this, that, and the other. All right, so now we told you at the beginning of this to check the box that you want your evidence packet. Now let's actually go over the evidence packet. That's going to be mailed to you, and that also is supposed to get to you 2 weeks before your hearing, right? So that way you have enough time to really look at the information. But the evidence packet is filled with information. So there's only a few pages that we believe that you should really focus on when you're protesting. The first page is the summary page. It's the first few pages when you open up the packet. It's going to let you know if they know about the permits that you've pulled, right? Because they know about the permits because they got to know the changes of your condition. So if it's gotten repairs, they'll know about that and adjust your condition accordingly. Then they at the bottom here on the improvements, where I have that bottom star, blowing it up. Here, it's going to break down the improvements that you have on your property. Now, what is an improvement for this part of the conversation? Anything improved to the land. So if I get some concrete and I just pour a little slab, I've just made an improvement to the land. So if you have a shed, oh, well, that shed is very rickety, it's in bad shape, it's still an improvement, so they have to put a value to it. Even if it's $50, they're still going to put a value to that shed, right? So they also put conditions. So you need to make sure that if you have that crummy shed in the backyard and they're taxing you it as an improvement, you need to make sure that they know it's a crummy shed. Take some pictures, show that the condition changes, because each one of those, if you look at that star, it says COND in the column there. That's the condition. So that's that where I was talking about excellent. Excellent property is probably what they believe is a completely renovated property. A good condition property is something that, like I was saying, it could be laminate countertops and it just doesn't need any repairs to it, so it's in good condition, right? The average condition property is something that has wear and tear, right? The caulking that you're supposed to do around the windows, the extra paint around that's peeling around the property, those are deferred maintenance items that are not structurally harming your property, but it is more cosmetic and wear and tear type of items, not going to affect the structural issues of your property. That's when you can fight for an average condition property, which most people have, because you live in the property and you're going to have wear and tear to it. A fair condition is your structural damage. So your roof issues. Now you have a roof leak, that is a structural issue, right? If you have a foundation, major foundation cracks. Now I'm not talking about a little hairline crack that came with a little bit of shifting. I'm talking about serious foundation cracks that are really impeding to the property. You can get a contractor's estimate and see what the cost would be, and they can give you a little analysis for that. So, and then a poor condition property is basically a property that's not healthy to live in and needs to be probably demolished because of the severe condition of the structure of the property. Some people live in poor condition properties, and what I want to tell you, that it's okay to fight for a poor condition and not fear that code enforcement is going to come and find you, because they're not code enforcement supervisors indicate that they do not look at BCAD to determine which property has a poor condition to go and investigate that property. They get enough people calling 311 or doing their block walks to identify properties that for code enforcement reasons. So the next part of the evidence packet is the part that's going to tell you what properties you should look at. What properties Bexar County used to figure out your value. So if you go to the comp sales grid, so there's going to be lots of pages. I want you to flip to the comp sales grid of that evidence packet, and that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 10 properties that they use to come up with your value. Now what you can do is either ask a real estate agent, hey, can you pull comps for me? Like Ron in the back there, he's one of our volunteer real estate agents with My City is My Home, and we can do comps for your property with your evidence packet, because that's half the job for us. When we're doing comparable analysis, half the time we're looking for the comps to figure out what to use to figure out that value. Well, the Bexar County gave that information to you. So you can even do this yourself. You just go online, look on Zillow or Realtor.com, look up those properties and make the notes on how the condition of the property is different than yours. Their roof doesn't look like it has roof leaks. Mine does. And so you can make sure that when they made adjustments to your property compared to these ones, that they're taking that into account, and so that can help you lower your valuation. So look up each one of those properties and you can then come up with a value if you're able to. Then you find out the average between those after you made your adjustments, and then that will be the average range that you'll use to go and protest. Or again, you can ask the real estate agent, hey, can you do a CMA on my property to let me know what I should fight for during my protest. This is an example of what we do. So we'll take those properties, put into our database, and then it'll help us come up with a valuation and making little adjustments based on the photos and contractors' estimates that we receive. Now, a lot of people like to ask, what about the economic adjustments of the area? Like there's an abandoned home or there's a bank behind me. What are, can I use those, or the crime? There's lots of crime going on in my area. Can I use that for my protest? Well, the answer is look at that comp sales grid properties, pull them up, and are those properties near you? If those properties that were sold, because that's what the comp sales grid is showing you, 10 or so properties that were sold in your area. So if those properties were able to sell in your area next to that abandoned home or next to the crime area, well then that's a losing argument. I wouldn't bring that to your protest because other homes have sold in that area with those same economic issues. But if you look at the comp sales grid properties and you pull them up and they're not near those areas, well, then that could be an argument that you could make. Also, you could look at the comps equity grid. I don't really use that unless there's not a lot of sales in the area. So on that comps sales grid, right behind it will be the comps equity grid. Those are not sales, but those are home values in your area. They kind of use that as secondary to the sales data again. But that's another way to look at, hey, well, let me look at those properties used in the comps equity grid. It'll be about 10 properties again. Where are they on this area before you try to use that in your argument? All right. Now you're ready to protest when you have your photos, you have your contractor's estimate, and you got that reasonable value. The county said your home was worth $200,000. Your goal is $150,000. So your range is going to be 140 to 160. And that way you'll have that in your head. You don't tell them your range is 140 to 160, but that's your negotiated range that you have prepared for you when you go inside. Now you're at the informal. So hopefully you check that box that you're going to do the informal. Then you emailed your notice to protest, or you turn in your notice to protest before May 15th, and you email your evidence. So make sure you send in your evidence, your photos, and your contractor's estimates 2 days before your informal and before your formal hearing. They need to have that evidence if you're not going to see them in person. So informal, it's going to be either by telephone or by Zoom. So you're going to need to email them your evidence, your photos, and your contractor's estimates. So that way they'll have it in hand during your informal. Now, during your informal, it's going to be between you and the appraiser, just one person. And you're going to have that conversation with them. They're going to bring up your property on their computer. And guess what properties they're pulling up on their computer? The properties on the comp sales grid. That's why it's like you're using, why pull different comps? A lot of people say, well, why can't I grab different comps in the area? Because then you're just going to argue with them comps versus comps. To argue about the condition of your property, that the properties they use weren't the best properties because of these condition issues, so make your adjustments accordingly. Now you're at the informal, they bring up those properties, then you're going to say, hey, I emailed my contractor's estimates and my photos, can you get them? All right, they pull them up. They're going to ask you, can you start explaining to me the issues with your properties? Well, what you'll see in the photos is this, that, and the other, and I have contractor's estimates to go along with those issues. Here they are. So with your contractor's estimates and your photos, you can tell them, can you make your adjustments accordingly? And hopefully they get into your range of value. If they do not get into your range of value, so let's say the top was 160 for us in this scenario, and they offered us 185, you can say no to that 185 and go to formal. But if you go to formal, you'll start back at that 200,000. So that's one reason to stay at that one, to consider staying at that 185. Now, the other thing to consider to stay at that 185 is ask them, all right, before we give up on this, what more evidence and do I need more contractor's estimates? Do I need more photos? What was I missing here to get you down to, let's just say 150? Well, since you're not willing to get down any farther, what did I need to bring into this hearing to bring my value down more? And hopefully they give you an answer. If they're saying that they don't really see it, you really need to consider, because if you're not able to bring any new evidence to the table at the formal, it's very unlikely you're going to get a different answer. You can also ask for a second opinion at the informal. So if they get into to a point where the value that they're lowering that you're asking for is more than 10% of the value, then they have to get a supervisor's permission to increase to lower the value more than 10%. There you go. Sorry. So in order to lower your property value more than 10%, if at a certain level of the appraiser, they may have to get a supervisor's permission to lower your property value more than 10%. So it's easy for them to lower their property up to 10%. That's up to the appraiser's discretion. Then they have to go to a supervisor to get it lower than 10%. So that's another reason you could ask them, hey, can you talk to your supervisor, get a second opinion about that? You can even talk to the supervisor if you really need to. But so let's say you disagree with them, but they told you, all right, well, if you brought some more photos of your roof repairs that were needed and maybe another contractor's estimate, then we'll go ahead. That might help your case out. All right, now you're going to go to the formal. That's going to be on a different day. You're going to get your new evidence. You're going to email it to the formal, to the same Bexar County 2 days before your formal protest. And now that's going to be between you, the appraiser, and 3 members of the appraisal review board. Those are independent civilians that have no appraising experience. They're supposed to be an independent panel on